All right, welcome back to my journey, because that's what we're kind of coining this mini-series. But I've been talking about how I put together my dream farm. It was the one that we sold. And Ethan brought up a good point. Maybe we need to talk about, selling, the selling process and why I sold, and then, kind of where it went from there. Like, what does Dream Farm 2.0 look like? And that also leads me to the question of really people asking themselves, like, what is a realistic dream farm? Like for you, being as young as you are, you might have a different answer than somebody who's, my age starting out. So let's put our 15 minutes. We forgot the egg timer on the last round. Ready, go. Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute Food Plot Blends, the Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail app, and Hoyt Archery. So we sold Dream Farm 1.0 in 2020, and it wasn't really for sale. There was a part of us that knew that we were going to have to move at some point. To be closer to aging parents. We were 4 hours from my mom and dad, and we were about 7 hours or so from Pam's mom. And so we knew at some point that this was going to have to, we were going to have to make that change. Whether we had to sell the land or not, would have been more of a question. We could have moved and bought a house and not sold the land, probably. But then, my whole point was, if I'm going to drive, if we move someplace where, my wife wanted to be in the Iowa City area because of, the action in this area is a little bit, warmer than maybe some parts of the state, But, so if I'm going to drive 2 hours south to go to Dream Farm 1.0, might as well drive 2 hours north and be near my parents, in the area where I grew up, in the bluff country of Northeast Iowa. So that was what motivated the decision to sell, was just to spend more time around family. I knew that if I didn't sell the land, I'd be going that direction.
But you never technically put your land for sale?
No. Nick Skinner with the Iowa Land Company, he just approached me and said, I've got somebody who's looking for land like what you have. Would you consider selling it? And I knew Nick, and I didn't take it bad. I think at first I said, I don't know, Nick. I don't really want people running around here, and, because you just think they're going to be tire kickers. And it's like, I don't want. So I said, I don't want to list it. It's not for sale.
Yep.
But if you've got a really serious buyer that's not going to be, just, taking me through all this whole process and then, at the end of the day, come up with a stupid offer. If they're really serious about it, then we would consider it. And that's really what happened. I mean, Nick brought the guy. We spent, 2 different occasions on the farm with him. I knew so much about the property and all the different things that we had done to make it better, all the habitat work. So it was pretty easy for me to go from area to area and say, okay, I've just saved you 10 years here. I just saved you 8 years here, because when you do those practices and you make those improvements, you're adding value to a recreational farm, because you're saving that person time. But they have to understand it. Not everybody's sophisticated enough to look at it and go, oh, okay, he actually did this. You have to take them through that process and explain what it was before, what it is now, and why you did it, and then how much time that saved them. So I basically was really highly involved in the selling process, and I would recommend that to anybody. I mean, if you've done all this work and you understand what you did on that property and why, I feel like you need to be part of the selling process if it comes to that. Because you don't want to rely on the realtor to figure all that stuff out. He's just going to say, the basic stuff.
Yep.
He doesn't know when and why and how you made all these changes that made the property better. So anyway, that was what we did, and it didn't work out quite as well as I'd hoped. My hope was to sell that farm and turn around and do a 1031 tax exchange and buy something near mom and dad, within that time frame that you're allowed, and nothing came up. We've talked about that. There are certain parts of the state where land does not change hands. It's expensive. It's not easy to find. That just happens to be where my mom and dad live, where I grew up. So I ended up having to do the 1031 into commercial real estate, something that in theory would produce income that I could use that income then to borrow against when I finally found the property. So like, let's say, I took the selling price, dumped it all into, little retail buildings, that like a Dollar Tree or something would be in, or, a little office complex. I didn't find anything that I felt really, really good about, but I'm okay with it. You're only as good as your tenant, and I just don't know if I'm, how well I did. Time will tell. But, that's what we did with the money. And so then I can take that same income and show the banker that, hey, this is what we're making, this is what we've got to work with, and it's enough more now that he'll loan us then the money that I would have had available had I just done a straight exchange. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's kind of like an intermediate step. And you could say, well, you could sell that commercial real estate and just do a 1031 out of that and buy the recreational land. But as long as those hold up, you're actually coming out ahead with the commercial real estate. Because the rate of return that I got on the stuff that I bought is high enough that I could buy a lot more land if I spent all of it, than what I sold.
Okay.
So it was kind of it was an intermediate step that if it continues to work was a good one, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you really understand commercial real estate, which, I didn't. So we'll see. You're only as good as, like I said, you're only as good as your tenant. And if your tenant's gone, what is that land really, or that property really worth? So keep that in mind. But that did, at least in theory, work. And that's what I'm using for the money or the whatever I'm buying with now. I'm using the income that was generated, that is being generated from that commercial real estate. So that's the journey. And we're into Dream Farm 2.0. We're up to 100 or 625 acres. I had to didn't have to, but chose to buy part of it with my sister and her husband, my wife and I, my sister and her husband, just because the land is so expensive and it's just really, it's hard to swallow.
Very.
Yeah. I mean, it seems risky because you're buying at, at top dollar.
Top dollar.
But it just doesn't come up. Again, it's like, how often does your neighbor's land come up? And if you're trying to build a dream farm and you have a certain size in mind, especially if you've got vulnerability or access problems or whatever it is, it's like, I have to have this piece to really make this a complete farm. Well, when that piece comes up, you can't just watch it sell. So that's the downside of having the dream farm, is you're stuck. Then that's where you're going to pay too much. Whereas when you don't get to the dream farm too quick. In fact, some guys never get there. I mean, I know a lot of people who everything they own is for sale. They're willing to move on, whatever. Like, if I can make X amount, yeah, boom, gone, move on. So, I mean, that's a mentality too, but I always felt like I wanted to have my roots there.
And it's like everything new that comes up for sale in that area is like almost sets the county record for price sold.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, then you become your own worst enemy because
right.
we paid too much for that piece. Well, that's what all the neighbors around there think land is worth now. It's like, yeah, you almost need more volume. You need more sales volume so that there's other transactions that are falling in there that are lower and sort of setting the tone. When there's so few transactions and it's such a feeding frenzy for those properties that come up, then there's not a sense of stability in that. It just feels like there's no end to what people will pay. Well, there is. You just haven't tested it because there aren't enough properties on the market. So where does that leave us? I think that wraps us up, right?
Yeah.
Our egg timer hasn't gone off. Shoot, we got 6 minutes left.
I know.
we could take a little nap.
Yeah.
There is one thing left to talk about, though, and that was what I kind of mentioned at the beginning is, what is a dream farm? Like for you, I'm going to ask you, you're 21, right? And is that right?
Yep.
Legal drinking age.
Legal drinking age.
Watch out. Watch out, Mom and Dad. He's ready to roll. No, so Ethan is 21, young, ambitious. He works hard. He's got a decent income that he's created even while he's going to college. So let's say, what for you do you look at and say, okay, that's my dream farm? I mean, what are you looking for? I mean, what do you want at the end of the day? Like, how do you define it?
Well, I think, at the end of my life, or not at the end of my life, the end of my buying, I want to have 1,000 acres. Maybe that's just something, picked up from you, but it's just like the 1,000 acre mark is like, it seems like it's like the pinnacle. And I mean, really, I have no reason for that other than, that's something that you did. A lot of the people I follow, that's what they've done. And, that really interests me. I feel like that's a good amount of acres to where you can grow deer, have food plots, not have to worry about anything. You could go tuck in the middle of the property, not see anyone, you're secluded out there. So I think, at the end of the day, at the end of, my buying cycle or period or whatever, I want to have 1,000 acres.
It's a reality, though. I mean, his idea is realistic, because some things have to click for him, but he's got 30 years, of being able to work on that. It's not like he's got 5 years. He's got to figure out how to, create a 1,000 acre dream farm in 5 years. He's got 30 years. That's very realistic. You've got to move stuff around. You've got to understand value. You've got to buy some and sell some, and you've got to figure out, how to get from here to there. You're not going to do it on your income alone.
Yep.
Land is too expensive. But if you're selling land and buying land, then you're gaining that same appreciation. Like you're locking in the price of land when you start buying. It's like, well, you start buying at $4,000 an acre, well, yours going up too. When you're selling yours to buy $6,000 an acre land,
Yep.
It's not like you're buying $6,000 an acre land. You're using that $4,000 an acre land to help you step up to that. So, getting into the game is so critical for you at this young age, because then you can stay with land as it appreciates, and you're trading land for land. You're not trading land for dollars. You won't keep up.
And it seems like in the last 10 years, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like land is like really skyrocketed and like shot up. But,
Yeah.
there is the appreciation. It's a straight line, or seems maybe it's not a straight line anymore, but
Well, temporarily it hasn't been.
yeah.
So, I mean, the bankers have always lived with the idea that it's a 5 or 6%.
Yep.
And it hasn't been recently, annual appreciation rate. So, I feel like, those numbers maybe don't hold up right now, but maybe long term they will, and they should.
Yeah.
So, I've always told people when they say, do you think land is overpriced? It's like, yeah, I really do. It's overpriced for today.
Yep.
But if this price doesn't drop 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, this might feel okay, this number.
I was going to say, I'm not going to wait for it to come back down, because
Yeah.
then I feel like you're just going to be waiting and sitting on your hands.
And you don't know.
And then you're never going to buy something.
Yeah. Yeah, you just don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to be in any panic right now. I mean, I think it's more likely to go down I think you're more likely to spend too much now than to miss an opportunity now. That's what I think. The odds favor it being at this number or less a year from now. That's what I think.
Yep.
It depends on where you're at, where you're buying. And again, I think, you're talking about different parts of the state. I mean, I know in those areas that land went up and is settled.
Yep.
It really has moved backwards a little bit. So it's not like it's just going to the moon everywhere. So I don't feel like there's a panic right now. But if you see that property that is a good value, there's really no reason not to buy it, because you don't know for sure where it's going to go. Like that 80 you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get it bought for the right price, you might not do good in a year, because maybe it'll drop, but within the 3 to 4 or 5 years or whatever, it's going to be back or above, because that price is a good price.
Have you ever lost money on land?
I haven't, but I might now.
You don't lose it if you don't sell though.
No, you don't. But I think if I had to sell some land right now, I'm not sure how I would do. Because it's just been so expensive to buy. It's a weird time. But where are we at? We're down to 40 seconds. I'm going to turn it off. So I think that's it. I'm sure we'll come up with a lot more that we can talk about that spins off from some of these topics. Like how to use the 1031. Really, what are the actual steps there? Like more detail. How do you set up an option with somebody? How do you manage a timber harvest on your property? How do you, whatever, how do you make a property worth more? Like what do you do to realize the true value of something that you feel like you bought, at a discount? What do you have to do other than just, put it up for sale again? I mean, that's not right. So I think there's plenty of room to talk about more of this stuff. But we covered a lot.
Your whole process.
Yeah, the
1995 to 2023.
Yeah, that's right. So what is that? 18 years. 18 years, right?
No, more than that.
Oh no.
28.
28 years. 28 years. Gosh, I'm getting old. So it doesn't happen overnight. You don't get rich quick. You don't get land rich quick. Anyway, well, we appreciate it, and like I said, we'll keep touching on this stuff. And so, if you want to create like a GoFundMe and see if these guys will contribute to your.
If everyone sends me like $5, that could probably give me a good down payment, at least a start.
Yeah, I mean $5 just to put a young man into his dream farm.
Yeah, I mean that's nothing.
We're not hanging that one out there. You're gonna have to find a way to build it yourself.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you right back here again, probably in a week now, for the next episode of The Dream Farm. And remember to always dream big.